On February 6, 2014, a group of Finnish cave divers traveled to Norway with one goal: to navigate the icy underwater tunnels of Plura Cave. None of them expected that this trip would soon become one of the most shocking cave diving disasters in the country's history. One diver, 46-year-old Kai Konkanen, understood the risks better than anyone. Just a year earlier, he had lost a close friend during a demonstration dive at the Monanto quarry. Yet he returned to the depths again, this time with 4 experienced teammates: 42-year-old Patrick, 40-year-old Jari H., 34-year-old Jari Y., and 33-year-old Vesa. Their plan was straightforward on paper: enter the water through Plura River, follow the submerged passage system, and emerge from a second exit miles away. But Plura is one of Northern Europe's deepest underwater cave networks. Newly explored sections dropped more than 130 meters straight down. The water was near freezing, visibility was fragile, and several passages were no wider than a human torso. Even the smallest error, a snagged tank, a flickering light, or a wrong turn, could turn a 5-hour mission into a fatal trap. After cutting a triangular opening in the thick ice, the team slipped into the darkness. To reduce risk, they split into 2 groups. Patrick and Jari H. went ahead first using underwater scooters. About 90 minutes later, once debris had settled enough to restore visibility, the remaining 3 followed. The first part went smoothly. After a 34-meter descent, they entered a massive air-filled chamber stretching more than 250 meters long. It was a rare moment to breathe, speak, and reorganize, but comfort has no place in Plura. The next section was infamous. A narrow, twisting corridor where even a slight shoulder movement could scrape against the rock. Patrick pushed forward. That was when Jari H's flashlight suddenly died, then flickered. Patrick turned back and saw a nightmare unfolding. Jari was stuck. His backup tank had wedged itself between the rocks, trapping him mid-passage. Panic at this depth is lethal. Patrick dropped his scooter and shoved the tank just enough to free him, but the brief moment of struggle revealed something far worse. Jari's regulator had slipped from his mouth, and freezing water had rushed into his lungs. He was already gone. Patrick froze for a second, staring at his friend's lifeless body, but hesitation meant death. His dive computer now showed that his original 120-minute decompression time had jumped to 400 minutes. The escape had just become twice as long. His only option was to swim forward toward the far exit. Meanwhile, the second group had reached the same deadly bottleneck. Vesa heard the sound of a diver in distress alarm and swam toward it, only to find Jari's body blocking the passage. The sight was overwhelming. They had to pass him to survive. Turning back meant an unpredictable and extremely risky decompression climb. Behind him, Jari Y began panicking. His breathing became chaotic. Before Kai could stabilize him, the panic overwhelmed him, and he drowned. Now, the group had 2 bodies floating in a tunnel barely wide enough for one diver. Vesa forced himself past the narrow gap, scraping along the rock, while Kai, realizing the danger, decided to retreat and head back to the original entrance. At this moment, the survivors were unknowingly separated. Patrick and Vesa were heading toward a dry air pocket known as Stein Ula Flag. Kai was swimming back through the long, freezing path. Patrick reached the surface first around 9 p.m. Vesa emerged about an hour later. Kai resurfaced near the ice hole at around 1:30 a.m., dragging himself into a nearby van, shivering, exhausted, and unsure whether anyone else had made it out alive, until he saw Patrick and Vesa approaching. After nearly an entire day trapped in one of the harshest cave systems in the world, only 3 divers survived. 2, Jari H. and Jari Y., lost their lives in the dark, silent tunnels of Plura. The cave served as a grim reminder. In these depths, even the smallest mistake can draw the thin line between survival and tragedy. 4 years later, another descent, larger in scale and far deeper, unexpectedly turned into a survival story that caught worldwide attention. Hidden within the rugged mountains of Abkhazia lay the Veryovkina cave, often listed in some documents as Veryovkina, one of the deepest cave systems on the planet. It plunged more than 2,200 meters underground, and fewer people had reached its bottom than had traveled to outer space. In September 2018, a team of Russian cavers, led by Pavel Demidov, decided to make their second expedition into its depths. Joining them were British photographer Robbie Schoen and his assistant Jeff Wade. Their goal was to document the cave's rare geological formations and collect samples of tiny creatures, insects and crustaceans that lived in complete darkness, possibly belonging to species unknown to science. Preparation was brutal. Every member carried nearly 30 kilograms of equipment, along with multiple layers of clothing to endure the freezing temperatures. The entry itself began with a narrow 32-meter vertical shaft, ironically the easiest part of the entire journey. After that came a maze of twisting tunnels, crawling sections, mud-choked passages, and icy chambers that stretched for kilometers. Reaching the first underground camp required an 8-hour descent of about 600 meters, and reaching the bottom would take several days. For that reason, the team set up 6 underground camps where they could rest, warm up, and dry their gear. For the first 6 days, everything proceeded exactly as planned. Camps were established, the deepest chambers were explored, and several biological samples were collected. But on the 7th day, an unexpected disaster struck, one that none of them could have predicted. A massive surge of water, fed by heavy rainfall on the surface, roared down through the upper levels of the cave. Floodwaters had changed course, and any warning signals that might have reached them were already too late. The lower camp was filling rapidly. The team in the upper sections managed to contact those below using the cable system, but the group deep inside the cave did not realize how fast and how violently the water was coming. Within minutes, their camp was engulfed. Robbie reacted instantly. He threw on his protective gear, clipped into the rope, and began ascending. Powerful currents made it difficult to breathe, but he pushed upward. Jeff Wade followed close behind. For hours they fought against freezing water and relentless pressure, inching their way higher. Their quick response was the difference between life and death. They had to secure a path for themselves and for anyone still behind them. After a long and exhausting climb, Robbie finally reached a slightly drier ledge where he could stop and catch his breath. Jeff reached him shortly after. Meanwhile, 2 members of the upper team who had received earlier warnings were safe, but the fate of the 5 Russian cavers trapped in the flooded camp remained unknown. The struggle continued. Even though the water levels rose for a while longer, the flow eventually began to recede. Seizing that moment, Robbie and Jeff pushed onward, climbing steadily toward the surface. After spending nearly 20 hours trapped in the underground camp under brutal conditions, the lowering water finally opened a way out. Still, it took them 4 more days of climbing, navigating, and crawling through the vast cave system before they reached the surface. This incident revealed a harsh truth. The dangers of deep caves are not limited to narrow passages or darkness. Sudden water surges and unpredictable forces of nature can turn a routine expedition into a catastrophe. Yet it also proved something else. Preparation, leadership, and human determination can turn even the most hopeless situations into stories of survival.